Now, stock market research platform Maqro has just closed an oversubscribed capital raise round, securing $3.5 million. To tell us more about the plans for the cash is founder Conrad Song. Conrad, great to have you back on Startup Daily.
Hi Simon, good to be back.
You're a man in the dark there. Good looking background you got behind you.
I've noticed background doesn't do me any justice. It's the whole COVID work from home thing.
Yeah, isn't it just? Look, congrats on the raise. Tell us a little bit about it.
So as you mentioned, it was oversubscribed. So we've actually tranched it out twice. So we've got the first tranche has come in, that's about $3.5 million. And we actually expect, because there's a couple of stragglers in there, a few guys that want in, but they need a bit of time. So we're expecting maybe even another $500,000 to $1 million over the next month, towards the end of July. So it's looking pretty good. But yeah, we're obviously very privileged and very happy to have closed it off successfully.
Now, it's been an interesting time for markets since we last spoke. Tell us a little bit more about the Maqro journey and what you guys have been up to as you've built out your fintech.
Yeah, so we've experienced pretty strong growth across a lot of metrics, whether it's revenue, funds under advice, the research track record. I think probably the most interesting thing about the timing right now is that it couldn't have come at a better time because, as you've probably seen as well, fintech is absolutely booming. It's ripe for continued development. We've got a lot of focus on the sort of execution side of the business. The superheroes, stakes coming back on with an ASX sort of avenue outside of the US stuff that they do. So a lot of good stuff is happening. We're focusing now, because we've got the infrastructure on sort of the wealth management side of the business pretty much down pat. What we're really looking to do is press forward pretty aggressively on the product side of things. So to give you sort of a quick rundown, we're currently working with open markets, APIs. We've got a pretty awesome team when it comes to the dev side. So UX, UI designers that we're dealing with now are pretty much probably the top in the industry. They've worked with CoinSpot, ZipPay, our dev agency, or sort of the dev team that we're dealing with. For the front end, have some pretty prominent guys, Airtasker tech leads. And also we've partnered up with Open Insight. So they do a lot of research analytical tools for institutions. And so it's going to be really interesting to sort of bring them into the program and sort of focus on the retail market, which is a little bit new.
Round is oversubscribed. You've got a couple of stragglers who are mad keen to get in on the deal. What's it been like raising in this period? Is everyone sort of swarming around thinking you've got a great business, great idea? Have you had sort of people knocking on the door constantly saying, how can they be a part of Maqro?
Well, yeah, it's been very well received, obviously. I think it comes off the back of the approach that we're taking to the fintech market. Like, as I mentioned before, there's a lot of transaction or execution services out there that are really sort of going aggressively on that millennial market. But one thing that I think a lot of investors are going to start to realize who are in that space is, the market's fairly frothy, as you know. And so as soon as the markets pull back or we start to experience some real volatility, those very investors are going to need some help. It's almost the execution side of the market, I would say, is comparable to it's almost like tobacco companies saying, hey, you guys are 18 now, you can buy cigarettes really cheap from us. It's not that bad, but you know what I mean. I think for us, what we're trying to focus on is actually empowering investors with real tools so that they can focus on making money. Whether that be really cheap brokerage is really not our game. Our game is, okay, how do we actually provide them with the tools to make the right decisions, get a lot of feedback. So we really want to, one of the big things that we're going to do, and I think this is what investors really like to hear about our journey, is that we're going to gamify the investor experience. So what we want to do is we want to provide investors with a bit of a framework. There are certain things, Simon, that every investor, whether they like it or not, they need to do. So it's like idea generation, analyzing the stock, deciding how much to buy and deciding when to buy. Whether you're actually doing that consciously or not, you should be. And so we've, through our product, we've implemented that as a sort of mandatory framework. And what we do, I guess, because of that is we get data. So we get user behavioral data. We get whether they're picking the right stocks, what their strike rate is, not just their performance. And we want to provide them with that feedback. So the gamification comes from insights being received from our product. So for example, I'm not sure if you're a big gamer, Simon, but you've got like FIFA and NBA games on the PlayStation or Xbox, and each player on a game has key attributes, right? So they've got speed, stamina, accuracy, you name it, and it provides them with an insight onto that player. So in that similar kind of way, we want to gamify the investor experience. And with the data that we gain from the investors going through that user journey with us, with those key frameworks that everyone should really do, what we're going to do is try to provide that sort of feedback and also create a community. So it's research in a really sexy and simple to use way. Now, because we've been focusing on research as a quality before we even had the product, we've got the track record, we've set up ourselves as an authority in that place. Execution, we're already working with open markets on a white label platform. Now it's just a matter of connecting the API so it's seamless in a single sort of platform, and then that community. So yeah, I mean, that's probably why they're excited.
Mate, it sounds fantastic. I think it tells me a little bit about the demographic you're targeting too. I've got to be honest, my gaming ended with Farmville. I don't know when that stopped, but that's my level. Or as I noticed, my investment strategy compared to my teenage son now, when I was 16, was buying souvenir stamp albums and first day covers. So, I'm not exactly the most savvy investor, but I'm really interested in where you take Maqro next. Give me a little bit of a macro picture of the business itself, because one of the things I was looking at the other day is the obsession we now have with cryptocurrencies. Is it something you're interested in, or do you think it's not really an investment strategy at all?
I guess it's like, well, let's first dominate the equity markets before we move on to cryptocurrencies. Look, the interesting thing about our market demographic is that it's actually quite broad. So we are, although I guess, with this new product, focusing on that retail younger generation. But and again, something that the investors like to see, and this is what every VC looks at when they look to invest in a company, it's the funnel metrics. It's how do you take a large user base and actually generate revenues. Like I said, the trading execution is one thing, but we're actually launching a managed fund as well. So it's a global long-short equities fund that's going to sit as a subsidiary of the business. And even before that funnel, we've got the advisory business, which is where you speak to real people, full service stockbroking on general advice, which we've been working on as a wealth division within the Maqro business right now without the product. So the product really just opens up sort of that landscape of us to target more people. And then the funnel kind of allows us to identify where we want to allocate those clients. Look, the future is pretty bright. With this cash, we're doing a lot of things. We're implementing a lot more sort of focus on the infrastructure to take on that growth. Now, that's been something I've been working on for the last 5 years, but it can always improve. I'm talking, new hires, senior people to come onto the firm, beefing up our advisory and sort of just general board. And then from there, it's making the necessary steps to really reverse engineer the IPO. So naturally for us being in the capital markets, we understand the opportunity that exists with tapping into sort of the public market. First step for us, we're going to switch to a public unlisted business. We need to get spread. So we want to take on an equity crowd fundraise later down the track, hopefully towards the end of this year or early next year, getting sort of that 300 investor mark. And then from there, I guess really it's just about achieving the key milestones before we look to take on that listing. So look, at the moment, it's really a race. There's a lot of good fintechs out there, whether they be in the execution space or the MDA space or the research space. We think the research space is still really untapped, and that's where we're focusing on. But what everyone is looking at is sort of how to increase their market share, and a listing obviously goes a long way towards that. So that's sort of our focus at the moment over the long term.
For people who are just hearing about Maqro for the first time, Conrad, kind of explain to them the difference between what you do and, say, being on a subreddit group where they're getting their investment advice.
Yeah, well, at the moment, if you were to sign up to Maqro, you'd be signing up to an online trading platform. You'd get access to an investment advisor who'd be looking to speak to you over the phone and through emails and chat and everything like that, giving you actual advice on when to buy and when to sell and how to manage the portfolio. We also have a research portal that communicates all of our content. So we're covering sort of investing, shorter term trading, ETFs, small caps. So that general traditional historical, let's say, subscription and advisory business model is something that I think we've mastered. Like I said, from the revenue and funds under advice, it's grown. We're obviously seeing some good indicators there. But what this product is going to do, which, look, we're probably going to try to schedule this launch within the next 6 months. It's going to come with a lot of marketing. The product is going to be geared towards self-directed investors wanting to have actual tools to make money. We're not really too interested in how much brokerage that we can generate from you, how cheap we can get, how expensive. Like, that's not our concern. If anything, if you want to continue to execute your trades on a discount broker, feel free to do that. But our focus is, well, look, instead of focusing all your time on saving $5 a trade or $10 a trade, why not focus on saving, $10,000 a trade by not losing on your investment, by making smart investing decisions? And so what we're trying to do is provide them the tools to do that. Right now, we already do. With a real person, with technology, we already provide all of that content. But the app and the desktop portal that's about to be released, it's just going to make things a lot easier. And as we know, people like easier. So yeah, that's the focus.
It sounds like an incredibly exciting time for you and for Maqro Capital in general. We wish you all the best. Congrats again on the raise, and hopefully those stragglers will come running in the door with the checkbooks in the next couple of weeks. Conrad Song, co-founder of Maqro, thank you so much for joining us on Startup Daily. No doubt we'll be talking again very soon because you're coming up to a really busy time. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Simon. You too.